Well, Mac, are you going to break some kind of record on council? What is the record for how many years?
Well, I have no idea, honestly. I know George has been around and on council for over 30 years, but there were years that he took breaks in
Yep.
between.
Yep.
So this would be my sixth time and
Consecutive?
consecutive, and my seventh time running for council in North Bay. I lost the first time I ran, and I think I came 12th out of the 27 or 28 that ran that time. But then the second time, I'm always finished, probably anywhere from ninth to sixth. I haven't broken into the top of the echelon, and I'm just comfortable with where I am, and I can play a role, and I just try to do my best when I'm there.
How many years?
This will be at the end of this term. It will be, so there was 3 the first year, and then Vic was another 4 years, so that was 7 with Vic and 12 with Al, so it'll be 19 at the end of it. And I was on council in calendar when I was in my early 20s for about a year and a half. So at the end of this term, I'll have over 20 years of municipal council.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're coming back for more.
Coming back for more punishment, yeah.
Yeah.
This will be my 17th campaign, that I've worked on, either for myself or for other candidates like George Marissis when he ran. And I started my first campaign before I even ran. No, I ran first time in calendar and then won, and then I helped Stan Lawler. It was my first experience on a large campaign, knocking on doors and things like that, and it was a great experience. Met my wife through it, so it was. I look upon that campaign favorably.
What year?
Well, Deb and I got married in '91, so it would have been 1990, somewhere in there. So that was.
I think I covered the 1988 municipal election. Or
Yeah,
87.
this is when Stan Lawler ran actually against Mike Harris.
Ah, okay.
For the provincial campaign.
Okay,
It wasn't
there.
the mayoral, because I
Yeah.
still lived in Callander at the time, and was my first time. I helped him because the riding at that point, Callander was in the Nipissing riding. It was Nipissing kind of Perry Sound, and then so I came in and gave him a hand, and was still on council in Callander, knocking on doors. It was a great experience. Had fun.
What have you been up to for this campaign? Like, what is...
I do have my signs up now. I've been doing virtually emails back and forth because there's been lots of people wanting to know how I want to, what my vision is for dealing with the homelessness issue, the arena, and those things. So that's taking up some amount of time. Again, my large signs are up. I've got probably 50 lawn signs out on lawns across the city. And got my brochure done. I've got all my advertising done with yourselves and
Thank
others.
you for supporting the magazine.
No worries. And then
We have 5,000 copies out there.
Yeah.
We're almost sold out.
Yeah.
We have some in stores for people, but I put into the mail 3,750 advertisers got them. Our retail guys got them. I'm saving a box now.
yeah. Well, my wife and I sold our house of nearly 26 years to our daughter and her husband and family, and so we moved into the O&R building. So I took about a third of what I got from you as an advertiser and left it in the bottom of the O&R building. And I walked by this morning and they were gone.
Oh yeah,
So
they love them.
so they're going to be enjoyed and
Good.
shared around. So
Right on,
Yeah.
right on. So, what are you hearing? Well, before I...
yep.
What are people telling you what they think about, let's start with the arena?
Well, lots of people want to know what it's going to cost. And until we have it all changed because of the federal announcement of over $25 million. That put a wrench in it, but in a good way. So we had a financial plan to address it.
Oh man, I'm sorry, I forgot to turn my phone off.
No worries. Getting back to the arena, we had a cost plan and to pay for it over a period of time. We'd hope from and are still chatting with federal and the provincial government from funding. The federal money came through. The green funding came through for $25 million. So that means we had to go back out, do some redesigning of how to make it green and environmentally friendly. So with that, that kind of pushed us out into the next election or the next term of council, which is great. So people want to know how it's going to cost. And my stance is I'm in favor of the location. Would I have preferred it being at behind Memorial Gardens, and so there could have been some synergies? Yeah, that would have been my preference. Was my preference, but the council made a decision, and I think the horses left the barn, and we've spent a considerable amount of money on the Omichelle location. Some people don't like the design because it's not what they're used to. But for the topography that's there, we actually saved money because of the design. Saves us some money because we don't have to do as much blasting and such. So it saves us money that way. So having the federal money is a positive, but we still have to live inside our financial plan that we had, in my mind. And if we can't live inside that financial plan that we put in place and that was presented to council in open meetings, then we can't move forward with it. And so I would hope that the next it comes inside that amount with the federal money. We'll still go after some provincial funds, and if we don't get them, then we'll still be inside our financial plan and move forward and pay for it over time. There is a segment of the community that doesn't want an arena at all. They don't care where it is. They just don't want an arena anywhere, and I can appreciate that standpoint. Everybody's different. I'm not expecting everybody to get in the canoe with me and go for a paddle, but I just want to make sure that there is a need in the community. When West Ferris shuts down, there is going to be a need for twin pads, or for more ice space there, and it's got a walking path. We've consulted Mark King, Derek Sjogren, Daryl Vinecore, and I think Chris Main did a committee 2 terms ago and got us to select a location and helped council with all of that information. So it's been studied, it's been talked about, there is a need, and if we can do it inside the financial envelope that we had, then I'm fully in favor of it moving forward.
I think it's a terrible design.
Yep.
It doesn't have any utility for expansion. The location, I'm going to give up on that. I didn't like it at first, still don't really, but I can understand it.
Yep.
I can also understand the infrastructure investment required at the gardens, which kind of negates that, although I think pad could be in that strong ground in between the Y and the gardens with parking out in the back.
Yep.
I think that wasn't explored well enough. I know there's a traffic issue on Fisher that might be more expensive, so yeah, I can understand the rationales between that.
Yep.
But the design out in Omichelle, even though it saves about $500,000 in blasting, it reduces the ability to expand that, and it doesn't give you a common area between the 2 ice surfaces so that you can have an event where people can watch both. And there's a reason why arenas are made that way.
Yeah.
But
again, keep in mind that in our lifetime,
yeah,
hopefully,
yeah.
I'm a funeral director. I haven't heard anything, so in our lifetime,
well, let me know if you hear anything.
That's
about
it.
Me,
Yeah,
right?
I will. In our lifetime, there are arenas at Pete Hanley Arena at the double rinks. Everybody knows it as the double rinks. That's going to need to be replaced.
Double stinks.
And so what will happen is that I would imagine it's going to be a twin pad again. And it's probably going to be the same replica of what we had. Again, there's going to have to be a needs assessment done to make sure that we still need 2 pads at the time. So and I'm sure the council of the day, because I won't, I probably will be in my 80s, so I probably won't be on council. Will make a decision based on the needs at the time.
Okay, pragmatic. Okay, I can understand it. Good consultation with the community going forward. I think that's an old plan, so even the price should be reevaluated as far as whether it's meeting needs. That's cool.
Well, I would hope that any council and staff at city are smart enough to know that we've got to consult. It can't be just 6 members of council deciding this is what we're going to do without consulting the users, the public, and getting some feedback. And putting out test balloons, as the federal and provincial government do, to see what people think. We can't just go, no council that I've been a part of, I hope, has just gone off and done it on their own without the consultation. But you're going to correct me on something, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, no, there's been some consultation that wasn't considered appropriately, and it wasn't held well enough to get good stuff, but I don't want to harp on all the different issues.
Yeah, okay.
I want you to continue with the rope.
Yeah.
Keep talking. So what else is at the people talking about what's their concerns? The homelessness thing is a huge issue.
Absolutely. And it's being a member of the DSAB, being a member of council, being a resident of North Bay, working in a funeral home that's just off the downtown core. I've known for years that there's a challenge. When I got appointed to sit on the DIA during this term of council, I started to hear, I had known of the stories, but never heard them, seen them written down on a list of the challenges that the business community and the homeowners have been seeing. So we're starting to hear more of those in the past 7 to 8 months. But they've been going on, as you're well aware, they've been going on for over a decade. But now it's much worse. And in Northern Ontario, we've always had this aspect that, Northern Ontario, it's worse here than it is anywhere else. Not just North Bay, but Nipissing and other northern communities. And I felt that. I've said that publicly. And but we needed, every time we went to the province, it was just anecdotal. This is what we're seeing on our streets. These are the impacts. These are the stories that our business members are saying. And so sitting at FNOM, the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipality, first as a board member, now as their executive director, all of the politicians from the 7 districts and the 4 cities are talking about homelessness, overdoses, mental health and addictions. Even Moonbeam and smaller communities are seeing overdoses that they, and several in 1 month. And so it's a real crisis in Northern Ontario. And it has been for a long time, but it just hasn't been maybe addressed the way that we've done it. We haven't done a good enough job addressing those challenges. So FNOM partnered with NOMA, which is the Northwestern Ontario Municipality Association, and then the DSABS Association, which is NOSDA, the Northern Ontario Service Delivery Association. We used some of our resources and funded the Northern Policy Institute to study the issue, not just in Nipissing, but across the north, and compare what we're seeing in Northern Ontario in our streets with Southern Ontario and the Eastern Ontario, so that we actually have, when we talk to the province, we're not just saying anecdotal information. And so that policy paper was released, and in August, FNOM, NOMA, and NOSDA shared that with 8 ministers and deputy ministers and all of their staff to walk them through the challenges that we're seeing. And the data that's there holds out what all of us have been saying for years. And the province now recognizes that those 8 recommendations that were made and the data are quite meaningful, and that they're going to help the government address those challenges that we're facing, that homeowners are facing, that residents and businesses are facing on a daily basis on our streets. And we can't, if somebody breaks into your house and then they break into your neighbor's house later on that afternoon after being arrested, you would think when we were kids, you broke the law, you went to jail. After our parents then beat the crap out of us. But the fact is that now some people are breaking into houses and being arrested 3 or 4 times a day. And they're released before the police officers done the paperwork. And so those challenges are there. But if you can't treat them, the best place to treat them is going to be in a center, in getting help in a community. It doesn't have to be North Bay, it doesn't have to be Sudbury. It should be the community that they have a support system in. We're seeing in North Bay people being released from institutions across the province, and because North Bay has clinics and support, they're being transferred here from an early release. They're being dropped off on an afternoon, late afternoon, without a plan. And so we talked, Phenom and myself and others talked with, the Crown Attorney to say that has to be addressed. That has to stop. And we have to make sure that these individuals first can maybe get treatment in their own community. Where there is a support system. There's no point in sending, if I had an issue, sending me to Guelph or sending me to Windsor to get help when there's nobody around to give me a hand and maybe fall in with the people that aren't going to be necessarily giving me the hand. So the province now will be, believe, will be more supportive than they already have been. They've sent an inordinate amount of money over the pandemic time on mental health and addictions and housing, but now I think it's going to be the monies that they're spending will continue to a degree and be more focused to help treat the mental health and the addictions, the root issues of the challenges these individuals are seeing, and then hopefully that they can get housed by themselves. Hopefully that if they are from another community, whether it's the Muskokas or whether it's Halliburton, that they can get home where there is a support system that will be there and healthy and keep them healthy and be members of their community again.
So why are we funding through the province and Canada a residential treatment center down on Lakeshore for 50 beds for people that are going to be coming to this community?
So there's already people here. And so what I understand is those people that are going to come to the Canada project aren't going to be people that are on the street. They're people that are getting need an assistance from a program. They're going to get help there. And then there may even be a housing component, and hopefully the other community partners will come together to support that program and support the people that they're trying to help. 50 beds, my understanding is this is a pilot project, and that hopefully it is successful, hopefully expands in North Bay. And but the problem is that there has to be not only help here, but there has to be help in a community that they've come from, so that if you've gone to Windsor, if I've gone to Windsor for treatment and we get well, that they're not coming back to their home community to get back in with the same crowd with no supports. So we need to ensure that across Ontario there's a support system. So whether you're from Moonbeam, whether you're from Holtar, or whether you're from Wawa, that if you've come to North Bay for treatment, that there's going to be treatment back in the community that you're from, so that you will go home and be get support in the community that you're in, and not just end up on the street in North Bay.
So it seems like there's been a lot of homework and meetings. I know that the Al McDonald had helped convene a large committee of people that are these same.
So there was
25 or so.
I thought there was 28 different agencies.
Yeah.
Came all together.
So all these support agencies that would be coming together to assist people out of this pilot project treatment center.
That would be my hope.
Well, when they were meeting and talking, and their plan is that they didn't think residential treatment was the right way to go for most people. It was a different plan, and this came out of the blue. So I'm still a little confused about the overall plan.
So the province put in a proposal for programs like that was awarded to Canada. So the province believes that residential treatment centers are the way to help address the challenges that we're seeing and the individuals that are on the street and that need assistance. So those centers, there was a bidding process. Lots of agencies, and I understand several from North Bay. Some were a part of the mayor's group round table, not his group, but that were at that round table did apply. And the province believed that the proposal put by Canador and others that was awarded was the best strategy. So yes, the mayor's group may have had a plan on what would be best suited for the 28 organizations, but the province has gone in a different direction. And it's being funded by the province. It's being supported by Canador. It's going to, in my estimation, help build some capacity in North Bay, because the students that are going to go through, that are going to be supporting in that program, are going to come to North Bay. They're going to get to, even if they're not from North Bay, they're going to get to experience North Bay, and hopefully decide that North Bay is going to be a great place to live and help people.
All right. I'll try on those rosy glasses. Why not? Whatever.
But again, if
It seemed kind of confusing for me.
Well,
I was trying to follow the ball, but
yeah, but the information shifts at times, and when you make a plan or how the 28 organizations that came together at the mayor's roundtable, they know what's on the street. They know what the challenges are. There has been some consolidation of some of those organizations since, because it makes sense that you can have some consolidation. Do they all need to consolidate into one organization? That's probably not functional. But the fact is that if there is a logical sense to consolidate, then as long as the client is getting served now that the pandemic is open, in person, as opposed to sitting in front of a video screen, like the viewers at home, they can get help one-on-one, which I think is what's been missing since the pandemic. The support is there. They had a plan of what was existing that day. The federal government, the provincial government, has put out an RFP on how their medical experts decided that this is the better way to go. And so they've been convinced. Minister Chibolo, who is an expert in this field, had decided and awarded a contract to Canador to run the treatment center in North Bay. And Canador has had a good track record with educating people and keeping them local. And I would hope that this program is going to be successful, because if it's not, then we're back to square one. And we have to be supportive. I think the other agencies that are in this space, they need to be supportive. They can't. We got to tear down silos. When I first got on council, my experience, I might be wrong, but certain agencies, boards, and commissions of the city didn't talk to one another. They were in their silos, and they didn't, they did one thing and they did another, and whereas now there's great communication, in my estimation, between not only the CAOs of an organization, but the staff as well. They communicate well with the city, and so as long as there's that dialogue, then I'm hoping that the agencies that are in the housing, homelessness, mental health, and addiction all come together along with this Canador project, because and the city does have a role to play in being supportive of those agencies. And not saying that we're going to go out and build a whole bunch of houses as a city, because that's not necessarily the city inside the city's mandate. We support the DSAP, whose mandate it is for social housing. And if we can look at our land surplus and donate some of that to address homelessness. If we can, we already waive some fees when they apply for building permits for social housing. So those are the kinds of roles that we can play. We can sit and we can be supportive, and I believe our staff know the challenges that are there. I know the council knows the challenges that are there, and we'll work together to kind of tackle this issue. We know everybody's passionate about it. Everybody wants to do their part to fix it, and we just need to ensure that everybody's on the same lake. They don't need to be in the same boat, Dave, but they need to be at least on the same lake and being supportive of each other. And if there's somebody else in the next boat needs a life jacket and they've got a spare one, then throw it over to them.
Well, good job explaining that. It's needed a little bit more information in the explanation like that. It's if something's funded, it's moving ahead. There's no use blowing it up. I'm not real big on blowing up things that are started just to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I do get my cackles up sometimes when it seems processes aren't followed. They lead to decisions that sometimes come back to bite you, similar to the transitionary type thing that's happening over where the former OPP building is in Chippewa. Bad location, apparently. What do you think? Well,
there was a finite amount of time for the funding to build the location.
At last minute, couple million coming in, and some things weren't tendered. Yes.
Well, we had to look. You needed a facility in an area that's going to be large enough to house all three levels. You needed a facility that was zoned because we didn't have years to plan it. And so when you look around the city, there's not a lot of them, and you need to be somewhat in a geographic area for the support systems that are already in place. Just like when we did the health unit. Calendar, when I was a member of the Board of Health in Nipissing Perry Sound Health Unit, the town of Calendar offered land at $1 because the health unit could be down there. It would, it was on a water system, but the clients that are served, how are they going to get from North Bay to Calendar? They don't have, a lot of them don't have vehicles, so it made sense that it was in the downtown core. Much the same as this building in Northern Pines, it needed to be in a geographic area, and so there were only really, in my estimation, 2 locations. One was going to be the health unit, the old health unit building, the other criteria was that there had to be a structure there already, because we didn't have 3 years during a pandemic to build a building. We could renovate a building, but we couldn't do it. The DSAB had the advantage of looking at the assessment, the condition assessment of the building where the health unit was. And then they had, I believe they understood, they had conversations with the property owner, and then they also had conversations with Mr. Kulis, who owns the OPP building. And the point is that of those 2 locations, the one that was more pliable and that could get it done within a certain amount of time with the funding that was available was the site on Chippewa Street. Is it an ideal location? No, it's not. It was the best of a choice that we had, and I know our staff at the DSAB have been talking almost daily with the school board. And possibly the school directly, but again, you've got everybody. Can you really talk to the school without the school board's permission? I'm not sure. So you need to. We're playing by the rule, and there's those conversations going on. I know they're talking to Barclay House quite frequently. I know they're talking to Troy Armories frequently, and so those discussions are happening. And
so they're looking for mitigation to deal with the issues caused by that location.
So once it's completely up and running, it should, and it's fully staffed. I would hope that some of the issues that are being experienced by the neighborhood have been addressed. And once the other things come online, like the treatment center down on Lakeshore Drive, those things, people living along the creek. In tents along the creek, which were, when I was in high school, lots of kids that I knew that went to Chippewa used that as a path to get to and from school. So I can appreciate that parents don't want those kids walking there. That bridge was put up by the Ministry of Transportation. I can appreciate that people don't, and they shouldn't be living in that facility or using it for other purposes other than walking back and forth. So I can appreciate all those things that need to be done. Do we as a city need to play more of an enforcement role along there outside of the police? Then maybe those are discussions that should be happening and can happen along there using our commissioners to maybe police that a little bit better. That may be to help the situation. But the city police have a challenge. They're arresting the same individuals multiple times a day. They're spending an inordinate amount of time dealing with the mental health and addiction issues. They're not dealing with speeding. They're not dealing with running stop signs, which traditionally would have been their role. And so and it's not just here in North Bay. It's across Ontario. But again, it's worse in Northern Ontario than it is everywhere else. And so, communities like North Bay should be able, using the data through the Northern Policy Institute, to say, okay, our challenges in the policing and emergency response through the EMS and the fire department to deal with these issues, we need to be compensated for that. So the next council has an opportunity to go using the data from the Northern Policy Institute to say, you know what, our emergency services are being stressed because of the homelessness issue that's worse in Northern Ontario. How about asking the provincial government for some funding? It's really easy for a provincial government to say no to special needs, but using the data that's there is maybe an approach that the city can take in the next council.
Okay, so there's some transitionary hiccups to deal with until all the pieces are in place regarding the transitionary housing and other services. And as you know, there's different pieces of the pie. The homelessness is not one thing. It's not all addicts. It's not all mental health, and it's not all impoverished people just needing it's pieces of that,
Yep,
right?
that's right.
So there's got to be more than one strategy because it's not one issue. So, and there's other pieces, like you say, that may help alleviate some of those issues. This is a temporary thing that needs to be mitigated. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I believe that the Northern Pines is going to be there for a long time. It's not. I
thought Peter said in the debate that he's just going to turn it into seniors affordable housing or something.
Unless he gets to be a member of the DSAB and can get other board members, 7 other board members to agree with him, that's outside the purview of the mayor's job in North Bay.
What do you think of the province bestowing the greater powers to mayors of bigger cities, and that might move on to other municipalities?
Well, my understanding is that it's a real concern across the whole province. Initially, it had been talked about just for Ottawa and the City of Toronto. But the discussions that are being held that I've sat in on, because I'm not a board member of AMO anymore, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, I'm just there as an observer, as the executive director of Phenom. There's a real concern that it's going to be every single mayor gets to make that decision. So it doesn't matter what your population is. That. And so, you and I probably grew up watching the Dukes of Hazzards, and Boss Hogg got to run everything. He got to pick everybody. And I don't necessarily agree with that.
I definitely don't agree with that.
And, so I'm thinking that I'm hoping there may be... they're doing it. The province is doing it for a reason. They're seeing the councils slowing down housing developments in the larger centers, but Northern Ontario doesn't have that issue. You walk in to any small community in Northern Ontario. If you don't need, if you've got your well already located, you can have a building permit by the end of the week. If you have all your ducks in a row, you can have a building permit within a week. In North Bay, we have during the pandemic those people, those developers and business people that have decided that North Bay was going to be a place to look at. They realized that instead of 2 years to do a subdivision, it's 6 months. And our staff, have streamlined. When they walk in, it's not a no. It's okay. Let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can make this work. We've got great developers that are already here, been here for a long time. We've got great consultants for them, and so there's people that are here and do a great job. I don't see the big city mayor issue. Shouldn't happen in North Bay. Shouldn't happen. It could happen. For communities greater than 100,000, but I don't think it needs to be carte blanche across the country or province. We saw all the integrity commissioner reports, not just North Bay. We saw all the infighting in some of the communities in and around Nipissing and across Ontario over the past 4 years. And just imagine if you've got one mayor deciding all of these things for themselves in a small community or a large community, medium-sized community or a large community like North Bay or larger. I can see that it's only going to cause problems and issues, not only for that mayor when it comes to election time, but for the city staff. You've got in North Bay, if you've got a majority of council, the staff go and work for the decision made by the council. If you've got a mayor that can make a decision carte blanche without the consultation and the support of the rest of the council, it's going to be tough. And to get 2/3 majority to overrule is going to be even tougher, because there's always going to be somebody that, a group of people that are tied to a certain mayor, and they're going to be supportive. Even if that mayor says the sun's going to rise in the west tomorrow, they're going to support that. And so I think it's going to be bad for communities, bad for municipal government, bad for communities.
What do you think about the pecking order for chairmanships and for the committees, and how should we really have a budget chief?
So our tradition has always been first past the post. The one with the most gets to decide whether he or she wants to be the deputy mayor and be the budget chief. I'm hoping that the first past the post always gets to be the deputy mayor in the city of North Bay. I would hope that the individual, sorry, I shouldn't be banging on the table when that's the mic. I think that there is merit in viewing, having somebody, somebody that knows, knows community services, knows how a snowplow works and all that kind of stuff, being in those roles. But I would like, if that's the wish of the next council, not this coming council, but the next council, that they should discuss it publicly, that they should have, and then change the procedural bylaw. So in the middle of council, so if a particular mayor gets elected and council gets elected and they want to wholesale change things, they can't do it right away. There's got to be consultation. It's not just waving a magic wand and it happens. There's got to be consultations. You've got to change the procedural bylaw. And the first meeting of council is we actually decide what communities what committees we want to serve on. And of council, but it's a council at large now, so you don't really necessarily go into, but you pick the chairs the first council meeting. Before you actually sit down and sign everything, we've already decided where we're going to be. So so are we going to pick everybody as they first past the post is the deputy mayor and the finance chief, and then 3 weeks later, after the next meeting, the mayor and council change it all around so that it's going to be somebody that the mayor or has been handpicked by one people or one or two people on council? I'm not a big fan of that. There has to be a mechanism. There has to be a strategy for it. And I would hope that whoever's elected mayor, whoever's elected on council, will sit down and thoughtfully review it so that 4 years from now, whether it stays the same as it is now or moves forward into a different system, but having one person hand pick who they want to be sitting on their left and right necessarily doesn't agree. I don't agree with that.
Do you think the good answers, by the way? I like your thinking on some of that, and I think it's important.
But not all. I picked up on that.
Yeah. There's you know me. There's no pom poms on that.
That's it. Yeah.
But give credit where credit's due. You certainly come across like you have 19 years of North Bay Council experience. I would
and a year and a half, almost a year and a half in Cowler.
Yeah, that counts. I was almost ready to just write you off as off to the faux Senate that North Bay needs for all the people that have had their go, and move you off to the pasture where I believe that
I belong.
Are taking up some space for maybe some new blood, but I also believe in veteran experience being part of the balancing equation. So you're not going to be shifted off to the pasture just yet. I'm going to give it some more thought, which is one of the good things about these type of long form conversations. We don't get a chance to do this very often, and I think hopefully the viewers get to see a little bit more about you than they have in the past. Yeah.
Again, I'm not one of these, as you're well aware. I don't speak just at council just to speak. There could be 4 or 5 meetings in a row where I don't raise my hand to speak on an issue on issues if I agree with them and I've done my research ahead of time, talk to staff, talk to the people that I consult with to make up my mind. I don't need to ask questions that I already know the answer to, and I do my homework and vote accordingly. But when it is an issue or somebody needs to be kind of reminded of some factualities, then I don't mind raising my hand to have some fun. But I behind the scenes I work tirelessly for nearly 15 years, being at AMO and Phenom as a board member. I was picked a couple times to help decide policy for not only Northern Ontario but for Ontario. And so the two good examples of that is the Ontario OSIF funding, which is infrastructure money that every municipality in Northern Ontario, it was called Northern and Rural Funding originally. And so I was one of the Northern policy people that got to sit in the room to decide and make the recommendation of the province on how this money was going to be spent. And, originally it was $100 million spent along. So you just can imagine you've got small mayors from communities less than 1,000. You've got mayors from, you've got mayors and councillors from communities that are under 6,000. You've got mayors and councillors from 10,000. And then I'm representing the whole, all of Northern Ontario, but also as a City of North Bay representative. So there, you can imagine you've got somebody that's a community less than 1,000 people. They have a challenge. A $25,000 replacement of a culvert is a big deal to them. North Bay, that it's a lot of money. $25,000 is a lot of money, but when you consider our capital budget, it's not a lot of money. It's a percentage of it. And so they need more help. They need help. And so some of those representatives were saying it's got to be only for municipalities under 1,000 people. You got mayors that were saying, and councillors that were in communities under 5,000. Well, it's only got to be, the number's 5,000. So I was kind of thinking ahead of time. And so I prepared a list of all of the communities in Northern Ontario, Northwestern and Northeastern, and what their current population was because of the census. And so every time somebody said 1,000, okay, so you've got these 5 communities are 1,020 people. They're not going to get money, because they've got 20 people more. How's that fair? You've got 994. This one's got 1,020. You get untold riches annually. This community doesn't. So I kept encouraging. We had one representative who was a community said, got to be under 5,000. Comes back the next meeting. He says, oh, it's got to be under 6,000. Because he went and talked to his CAO and realized that the new assessment's going to bring them over 5,500 or 5,300, and they were going to lose out if it was 5,000. So I kept using the statistics, the data, to prove this and to ensure that every single community across Northern and rural Ontario got funding. So the City of North Bay gets over $1 million a year for that, and does every single year. They doubled it, so I think it's a little over $2 million now. That's needed infrastructure money. That's stable, reliable funding, which this council and many other councils in North Bay, on my time, have asked the provincial government to supply. Also, I was handpicked to run and lead the Blue Box transition. I was the municipal lead for the provincial Blue Box transition. So for over a decade, sat on a table with municipal staff that are from across the province on the transition. And it was successful. So that means that the current Blue Box program is 50% funded by the province of Ontario. By the City of North Bay. The other 50% is funded by the producers. So that's Walmart, that's Unilever, that's Coke, that's Pepsi. That's not the newspaper chain, because they got a special deal. But anyways, so that
Screw the newspaper chain.
So that I said that more than once. So what's going to happen in North Bay after 2026 is that the Blue Box is going to be funded wholly by the producers. It's going to be collected in the same way as it is today. There's going to be a unified Blue Box. So whether you're in Callander, whether you're in North Bay, whether you're in Nipissing, or whether you're in Toronto, you're going to collect the same materials are going to be in the Blue Box. There's going to be, and the value of that is not only because of the taxpayer, saves the property taxpayer money. It's going to be funded by the producers, but also too there's going to be better environmental outcomes. And it's the fact that we all buy a razor and it's a big box, or you buy a computer chip and it's a big box with plastic and that item's this big. It's done because they're not concerned about it because they don't have to pay. They only have to pay 50% to recycle that if the person recycles at all. So the producers are going to do a better job in their packaging, which is going to have a better environmental outcome. They're going to run a unified recycling program across the province. And then after every single community that has a blue box system today, then they are going to go into the communities that don't have one. And most of those are in Northern Ontario. So if you're in Holtar or if you're in Moonbeam, you may not have, Moonbeam may, but there's there's over 80 communities that don't have a blue box program today in Northern Ontario. When they get a blue box program, that's going to be fully supported and funded by the producers. So those blue box products aren't going to be ending up in landfill. So they can drive into Wawa and sell a can of Coke, but they've never been able to run a successful program because it costs them too much because they're too far away from the markets. So the producers then have to pick that up, and so there's going to be environmental programs, a benefit across the province. I was fortunate enough to work with some great people and was the municipal lead for across that. So it's those things save the city money. The Ontario the OSIF funding provides capital funding every year, year in, year out. It's stable, reliable, so the taxpayers don't have to fund some of those projects. And the blue box, when it's completely taken off the property tax base, then that funding reduces what the levy is going to be required from all homeowners, and it might offset. It is returned to the property taxpayer. It just doesn't sit in a bank account. It's actually returned, and I think it's having better environmental outcomes is great. The other thing is that in that role as the waste lead across Ontario was that they wanted to run you'll remember that the provincial government wanted to run an organic program, green bin program, every single municipality in Ontario. And which in philosophy I totally support. But there was no funder for it. So I had a couple of issues. One is in Northern Ontario, in North Bay, I'll use North Bay as an example. There was no funder for it. It was going to cost us, and so these numbers are probably 3 years old, $2.5 million to create the program without any money from anybody. So that was going to be almost a 4% tax increase, a payment that we have to come up. We could probably get some grants, but there was still going to be a portion that the taxpayer had to pick up. Then it was going to cost us $2.5 million to run it. And without a funder. So that's a 4% tax increase the next year when we're mandated to run it. The other issue that I had is that when you're sitting down with the people from the Ministry of the Environment and you say to them, okay, what's the environmental outcome by running a program like this in North Bay, considering our urban and our rural density? They ran the numbers because it's all scientific. There's none. There's more harm to it than not. Then why do it? Well, it's the right thing because that's what the voter wants, is you're going to run it right across the province. Well, do you think they would want to run it if you have no environmental outcomes and you cost people money to do it? Well, so what I did was during a lunch meeting with probably 80 people in the room, I had Al Tomic, who used to work for the city, had given me years ago, and I still carried it in my briefcase, pictures of bears at the North Bay landfill. And so I went up to the presenter and I said, can I borrow your laptop for the lunch hour? And they questioned me why. They already knew who I was. So I threw the USB stick in and said, promises there's no viruses in it. And I put the pictures of the bears as a slideshow. And that just ran throughout the afternoon, or during the lunch break. And because during the lunch, prior to lunch, I'd said, there's bigger critters outside than the massive raccoons that you guys have in Toronto. Because all of the people that work in the ministry's office live in Toronto, live in the GTHA. They don't live in Barrie. They don't live in Aurelia. They definitely don't live in North Bay. And so they talked about these raccoons and there's going to be these issues. So I showed the pictures of all of the bears that Al Tomic had taken. There's one that has 13 bears sitting on top of the ridge watching the garbage truck. And I said, okay, these are our critters. And so, in the current Bearwise program at the time was you call Bearwise, and they say, well, what happened? I had a bear tear down my shed to get at my garbage. Well, why wasn't it frozen? What do you mean? The Bearwise recommendation was you buy a freezer for your garbage in rural Ontario, that you freeze the garbage and that you don't put it out to the curb for the garbage truck until within 2 hours of it being picked up. So said to the ministry staff, this is what MNR is telling you. They were able to confirm that. And these are our critters, and there is no environmental outcomes. What's the problem here? And so what they did is they ran the numbers, and there was only now three communities in Northern Ontario that fit underneath that number, the ratio that meant that they had an urban and rural density that was large enough to be effective and run a program that was actually going to make a difference environmentally with household gases. And Sudbury already had one and has one, so it's running. Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay now have to have a program, possibly by 2026. So North Bay, yes, in theory, totally want to support the environment, but if you do it, it's got to make sense that there's a benefit. And the city does have a little bit of a track record of doing things that do make a little bit of sense.
Well, I promised myself I wasn't going to make any funeral home jokes, but I'm getting a little stiff. We're going to wrap up with the last things that you feel are important to talk about so people understand why they should vote for you.
Okay. So, again, I've got some experience, 18 years or 19 years on council, and I know I have a very good, strong relationship with our other northern partners, not only in the district, but also across Northern Ontario. And I also have great relationships with not only ministers and deputy ministers, but also the staff that work day in and day out at Queen's Park. And so I've got access to them, and that greatly benefits. I have a track record of those relationships greatly benefiting not just North Bay, but all of Northern Ontario. So I whether I'm elected or not, I still want to do those to benefit the city. But being on council and having those relationships, there are synergies between them. Is that I'm able to deal with our staff, and our staff tell us the issues, and then I can go and see if there's something that we can work, or I can make a connection between whether it's John or Ian or Nick, and have them talk directly with somebody at Queen's Park on the policies as they're being created. Is because we've all been around too long that when there's been policies that have been created to just deal with the growth in Southern Ontario, and that made no sense. Bill 124, the building bylaw that we have across and that we have to manage under, our building department has to manage under, was designed and created for the growth explosion that happened in the 90s in Toronto in the early 2000s. It had no rationale for Northern Ontario anywhere, maybe other than Sudbury in Northern Ontario, but it changed the rules. So having access and sitting in rooms, talking to people as policies that are being developed by the province of Ontario and explaining the conditions in Northern Ontario is a benefit. I believe that I work well with others most of the time, and I have members of the current council. Almost all have called me at least half a dozen times to say, pick my brain on how they should bring a motion forward, how I view a certain issue to help them in their relationship building. And so I've got a good relationship with a majority of the current council, and I believe I'm one of those people that can build relationships with others. So having relationships and having synergies on a council is helpful, and not being diversive, because I've been on a diversive council before, and not a lot happens. So when you can talk to somebody, have a conversation with them, and they get to hear you, I get to hear them, and we can come to some common ground, does pay benefits. And so I believe I'm good at that. The pandemic showed us that North Bay is a great place to live. And the fact is that I think it's important that we remind people that actually live here that North Bay is a great place to live. Because I've traveled a lot and especially in Ontario, and I chose to make North Bay home. And I'm proud to be in North Bay. I'm proud to that my family, my wife, and my 2 daughters, and my 5 of my 6 grandkids choose to live in North Bay, call North Bay home. I think that's I think we need to be all reminded of it. If we don't travel, we don't go to see what the conditions and other are like in other communities. We just need to be reminded, and so I would hope that we take some pride in the community that we have, and so I would hope to work with the communications officer, other members of council, if they all agree that if a majority of us agree that it's important that we share that, and it doesn't cost us any money, that we work at that to remind everybody that North Bay does have challenges, huge challenges. Especially around the mental health, homelessness, and addiction, and inflation's hurting a lot of people. All of those challenges. But the fact is, those are happening everywhere, to one extent or the other. And but North Bay is a great place to live, and I think, and so is the Nipissing District. We need to remind people of that.
Well, I believe that's the case, and I don't think this is a city that's going to hell in a handbasket like some say. I think it actually is still a great place, even though it has the challenges. So I'm going to move you from my Deadpool list to still considering for the balance of the equation of who to continue, who should continue on council to make sure that it's not lopsided. So I thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you. Yeah,
I appreciate it.
No worries.
Right on.
Any questions, or if anybody has any questions, they know how to hunt me down.
Right on. Well, thank you.
Okay, thanks.